Hey guys, welcome back to CLOWNFISH TV. This is Kneon, and I am here with Mr. Aaron Sparrow. Say hello, Mr. Aaron Sparrow.
Hello, everyone.
We're going to talk about the declining comic book industry and the sadness that comes with that, watching it sort of decline and decompose in real time, and watching the people involved with the comic book industry just sort of not, from my perspective, not come to grips with the reality of the situation, as it were. And Aaron and I were in the chat on a live stream earlier today. It was run on, I can't remember the name of the channel.
Fanboy Planet?
Is that what it is? Fanboy Planet? It was Dan Shahin. I think his name's Dan Shahin. And he had a bunch of pretty notable people on. He had Gary Groth. He had Ross Ritchie, Mike Richardson, Dirk Wood from IDW. Mark Waid was supposed to be there, but he was not. We'll talk about that. And Steve Geppi from Diamond. Mostly this conversation seemed to be publishers and Diamond trying to, I don't know, work things out, side skirt the issues. I don't know. But it wound up being more interesting in the chat, I think, than what was on screen, at least from my perspective.
Oh, I definitely agree with you. The chat was far more interesting because actual questions were being asked and there was an actual debate going on, whereas the video was more everybody kind of glad handing, and sort of. Everything's going to be, we're going to get right back to it and it's all going to be the same. And I don't believe that that's true, number one. And even if it was, I don't think that's a good idea. But that was what was being sold.
Yeah. And, they gave, Steve Geppi plenty of time to discuss, some of the more controversial decisions, I guess, Diamond's made. And it did, to me, though, sound like it's like, hey, guys, it's fine. It's all fine here. Everything's fine. I guess I expected when you had this many people in the room. The reason I went to the chat was because I'm like, oh my God, they got all these people in one place. Yeah, hell yeah. I want to hear what's going on. Then there were journalists in the chat. We had, Rich Johnston was there. Heidi McDonald was there that I'm aware of. We had shop owners there. There were other YouTubers there. We'll talk about that. And I just kind of expected like a meeting of the minds, and it did not go the way I expected it to. It was very much like, everything's fine, everybody. Don't worry. We'll just, turn the shops back on and it'll just go back to where it was. And, for it having the people that they had there, I expected a lot more people to be in the chat. We had like 200 people.
Yes, 200. I think the highest that I saw it hit was 217. Now I dipped out after one specific point that we'll talk about.
Oh, okay. But, you too.
Yeah,
huh?
But I saw. I saw 217 was the max that it got up to. So it's a channel that's got 1,000, a little over 1,000 subscribers, and you had all these what would be big names if you're into comics. The heads of all these indie companies. I think the one indie company that wasn't represented was Dynamite. I saw Nick Barucci in the chat at one point, but he either wasn't able to go on or wasn't invited. Not sure which, but it seems like he should have been in there. But out of all those bigwigs from the comic book industry, and you could only generate a little over 200 viewers, which I would have thought you would have had industry professionals at least showing up in more numbers than that.
I think that's what surprised me. And again, this isn't like, look, I'm not throwing shade at the channel for being a smaller channel. That's not, because people are like, oh, you're big YouTubers are bullying. It's like, no. I'm just legitimately shocked when you have the people that you have coming to this event, and to me it's like God, the comic book industry doesn't even care about the comic book industry anymore. Where are all the creatives? Where's the rest of the media? I saw Heidi McDonald and Rich Johnston. I didn't see anybody else. Where are all the fans? Something like this should have been a huge draw to have all these people in one place.
You would have thought that the companies could have put out, even something on their social media saying, hey, like Dark Horse could say Mike Richardson's going to be part of this, and along with these other people, and Boom could have done the same, and everybody could have kind of promoted it. And I don't know that they did or they didn't, but if they did, that's even extra sad because it only drew 200 people, and most of them seem to be either YouTubers or Comicsgate. So it seems like Comicsgate cares more about the state of the industry than even some of the pros that are part of it. I can't believe that there weren't any pros in the chat, wanting to hear what was going on and wanting to ask questions.
Like, this is your livelihood, people. This is like, these are the people that hold your careers in the palms of their hands. And nobody showed up. I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. I mean, we don't even have a dog in this fight. I'm like, yeah, this many people in one place. So yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to hear what they have to say, And so I was like, God, when comics doesn't even care about itself, But yeah, so it started off, and again, Dan Shahin, I don't know him. I don't know. I thought he was a creator, but apparently all I can find is he owned a comic shop, I guess, at some point. Hijinks Comics in Willow Glen, California. I don't know if he's still, so he sold the store a few years ago. So I don't know what he's doing now, but I got to tell you, personally, my back was up pretty much as soon as this thing started, because right out of the gate, he was like, there are a lot of people on YouTube who think they know how the comic book industry work, but I'm here to tell you how it actually works. And I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, well, I can name about half a dozen people in this chat that I can tell you they know exactly what the hell they're talking about. We had Gary from Nerdrotic, who actually owned a sizable shop in California, and he sold it to Brian Hibbs, who was actually a guest on Shahin's show before. We had, creators, yourself and I. We had, I know that we had some other comics professionals in there that understand how the industry works. And I just, you're right out of the gate as kind of like, I'm going to show you. And I'm like, oh God, here we go.
And he did show us how the comic industry works, because he didn't ask a single hard question.
Yep.
And he, basically it was completely softball the entire time. And he kind of unveiled his channel as being kind of a shill channel. He didn't, there was no challenging. He didn't even really pull any questions from the chat that were, that were relevant, or that, you had Rich Johnson in there asking a lot of questions. Now, I didn't see, I kind of said on Twitter that I didn't see Rich asking a lot of important questions, but apparently I dipped out, and then he did kind of get to some serious things. So I do want to give credit where it's due and say that I was told he was asking some tougher questions. But
he was, even when at the time I was in there, I thought he was asking some tougher questions. The thing that got me, this is what's so damn disappointing about this whole situation all the way around, right? Because I mentioned, some other people mentioned that basically comics waited until 0 hour to come up with a plan B. Right. Putting all their eggs in the basket with Diamond. What is so frustrating is you look at, even though there weren't a whole lot of people, in that live stream, you look at the section that was in there, and even Ya Boi Zack, Richard C. Meyer himself, showed up. You've got all these people in one place coming from different areas of expertise and different, ways of doing comics, and they've got their grievances or whatever. But you have an opportunity to sit down and everybody put their heads together and fix comics. And all it degraded into was a bunch of petty bitching and backbiting, and the host, and about halfway through, called out Richard Meyer, to like stop the chat, and just called him out. I'm like, oh my God, seriously? I'm like, seriously?
That's the point where I pretty much, I stayed for a few more minutes, and then I dipped out, because I just saw what was going to happen. It was, the chat was going to be, was then going to start defending Meyer, and that was what it was going to turn into. Because most of the people, like I said, most of the people there were Comicsgate. Most of the people that cared to show up were Comicsgate. And they, you had one person in the chat that was trying to antagonize and saying, oh, you Comicsgaters, don't start any trouble. And it was like, nobody's starting any trouble. Everybody's being very polite. Everybody's being very respectful. And I think that maybe that's not what the host wanted. Maybe he wanted to kick the hornet's nest. And so he thought that he could do that. He'd attack Meyer, and then that would start, the chat. And then he could, point and say, oh, look at all these bigots. Look at all these, haters. I don't know. Maybe that was what he was going for. It didn't work out that way, because people still remained very civil.
Yeah, it was a bad look. I mean, I popped in for a second. I just said hi to somebody and immediately got jumped. It's like, you and your clickbait videos. I'm like, oh, piss off. I'm like, hi, have we met? But, I thought for the most part, again, you look at all the people you had there. Everybody sat down and they were willing to listen. They're willing to talk. But, we had people who just can't get over themselves. Causing, and it wasn't the people you would think, because again, everybody blames YouTubers, they blame Comicsgaters, whatever you want to, but that wasn't what happened. What happened was the host lost his shit. about halfway through because he couldn't stand the idea that Richard Meyer was in the chat. Now, why, you know, and I don't think, I'll be honest, I was watching the comments. I don't think he was asking any tougher questions than what Rich Johnston was asking. In fact, I think Rich Johnston was asking more pointed questions, you know, to get cut to the bone, which is like, you know, Steve, what's the deal? Steve Geppi, what's the deal with you holding, you know, people's payments and all this junk, you know, that's not cool. But I was just like, God, they're just, if everybody just freaking sit down and talk, you know, but they don't want to talk. And it fosters
some of those publishers I know for a fact hate each other.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, there's some strong... That's the thing. Everybody talks about YouTubers and comic skaters and whatever having strong personalities. I know for a fact that, you know, the people working within the industry, there are some real hotheads that work in the industry who've got, you know, reputations for being incredibly difficult to work with, yet, you know, they're allowed to speak their piece. They're not denigrated. And I think at the end of the day, it's, you know, because again, you compare that to, you know, Ethan Van Sciver's got a live stream going on right now. He's got over 2,000 people, you know, on his live stream. He just passed 6,000 sales on his Frog comic. And these guys are making millions of dollars. I'm like, you don't have to like what they say. You don't have to agree with them politically. But, you know, maybe you actually could learn a thing or two if you'd be willing to sit down and talk. And nobody seems to be willing to do that.
No, it's interesting that all these people got together, but I don't think that the host had anything, had anything prepared that challenged anybody. So that was hugely disappointing. The other thing that I thought was really disappointing was I wanted Mike Richardson to speak more.
Yeah.
I've met him at several shows throughout the years, and he's always struck me as just really sharp, and you know, he's very kind of like friendly and outgoing, and you know, wants to talk about comics and wants to talk about Dark Horse. And so when he came in, I was like, oh, it's going to get interesting. But they didn't really give him enough of a platform, or really, you know, let him expound on anything.
Yeah.
And so it was just, the whole stream ended up being kind of like a waste of time, and it didn't have to be that way. It really could have, you know, it was just people like reaffirming their commitment to retailers, but not stating any way that they were really going to help. You know, it's like, yes, there's super chats that are going to this organization that's going to trickle out some money to retailers. But, you know, overall, what's the plan? The plan just seems to be, we can't wait till the one basket is back so we can put all our eggs in it again.
There is no plan, Aaron. And anybody who's worked in comics for any length of time knows the truth. There is no plan. We like to pretend there's a plan, but there really is no plan. And they never planned for this to happen with Diamond. I mean, people have been talking about it for years. Even Rich Johnston's been talking about it for years. Like, what happens if Diamond goes out? Well, it's a good question. Well, there we go. Now we have our answer. Absolute chaos is what happens. And what I'm seeing, at least, you know, my armchair opinion is, you know, you look at, you know, all the infighting with the retailers now too, you know, people who can sell comics versus people who aren't allowed to because there's state mandates, and everybody's, you know, just freaking clawing each other.
Don't have your shop in California then. I mean,
right.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, your shop is in San Francisco, Brian Hibbs. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I mean, look, but the thing is if you really, I guess my feeling is if you really care about the comic book industry, you should be happy that people are selling comics. You should be happy that people are buying comics, making comics, that there's still a market for comics, even if it's not your comics. You know, if you really claim to only care about the art form, you should be thrilled that people are out there on Indiegogo making $500,000 or more, you know, selling comic books. You should be thrilled that maybe people in the Midwest can still keep their shops open, because maybe it means these publishers will stay open longer, which means that when you can come back online and join in, you know, that they'll still be there because they were able to weather the storm because of the shops who didn't have to close down.
And do you really think that you're losing business if a shop in Minnesota is open and your shop in San Francisco is not? You don't have a crossover audience, all right? Nobody from Minnesota is driving to your shop and going, oh, they're closed. I guess I'll go back to my shop in Minnesota. That's not what happens. So you're not losing anything except sales to your customers, who, if you have built loyalty with them, are going to wait and are going to buy their comics from you.
Yeah, I don't know if he's worried that, you know, people are going to go to eBay or what the deal is. And I think, look, the elephant in the room is, and I really think that why a lot of these people are freaking out is they are middlemen, and the model seems to be moving more and more. Again, I love comic shops, but the model does seem to be moving more and more toward direct to consumer. And if these publishers start getting that through their heads, that like, why do we need Diamond? we can sell to comic shops. We don't have to sell to comic shops. We can just mail stuff to consumers. That's a dangerous thought because the whole system becomes upended at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that used to be the way that it was too,
yeah.
With subscriptions and whatnot. Now, granted, you'd get, your comic book sometimes in the mail with just a stamp on it and I'll beat to hell.
Yeah.
You can still have that comic subscription. Now obviously they'd be a little more savvy and they ship them better. And there's companies like DCBS and things like that do it all the time. So, yeah, I mean, I know that there was that video that we talked about a little bit, I think on the live stream that we did. Which was the third space for that Boom was putting out. Your third space and
homeless shelter / coffee bar, or whatever, / comic shop. Like, oh my god. Oh well, this is funny. Like when I was a kid, the very first comic shop I went to, that guy was like he majorly had OCD or something. Like he would literally, if kids went into a shop, he would follow you around the shop, and if you moved any of the books, he would like go put them back, and it was kind of crazy. So that kind of turned me off the comic shops for a while because I'm like, God, I can't even look at the freaking comic books.
My first comic shop was it was a coin shop, and the guy just had some comics. I mean, he had a good selection, but they were all behind the coin counter, so you couldn't like go and peruse them. You had to just kind of point and ask for what you wanted.
Yeah.
And that was like, and he was a really nice guy and everything, but yeah, it was. That was my first experience, was kind of like, the comics are behind the counter and you've got to ask, and you can't be pawing at everything.
Yeah. But I gotta tell you, I mean, for all the people that were in this call, I got nothing out of this. I literally, I had like no, other than Steve Geppi just trying to tell everybody that things were going to be fine, and everybody was kind of reminiscent about the old days. But hey, it's all fine here. I got nothing. But then again, I bailed. I'll tell you what happened. What happened was the host called out Richard Meyer in the comments, and he could have muted Zack. He could have ignored Zack, and Zack, I don't think, was asking any questions that were tougher than Rich Johnston's. Stopped the chat to call Zack out and then chastise him for not going on his show. Like, I invited you to the show and you couldn't even bother to come to my show. You don't care about comics. You just peddle hate. And I was like, what the actual fuck? I'm like, this is the meeting of the minds. I'm like, screw this shit. I'm out of here. Like, I'm out. I'm done.
It was just the same old us versus them nonsense that the industry's been peddling for a couple of years now, and alienating customers. And that guy just alienated a bunch of people from his channel by doing that, myself included. I was just like, I don't need this, this is not a constructive conversation. And, and so I walked away, and I won't be back. And I think there's a lot of people that'll feel the same way. And that's kind of the problem, is he chose to do that. Look, I get it. You're upset that this guy won't come on your channel, but honestly, I'm pretty sure Zack is a busy guy. He's running, his own channel. He's producing books like crazy. He's employing people. And that was the other thing that got me, is the guy in the chat that was like, Richard Meyer's contributed nothing to the industry. And I'm like, well, he's got more people working right now than any of the comic companies do. His guys aren't.
There is that.
His guys are still going. He's still employing people. There's still a letterer. There's still a colorist. There's still, these people still have paychecks coming. So I do think that he's contributing some things in that respect. And he's also giving customers what they want. They want the stories that he's telling with the characters that he's telling. They buy the books. That's something that, maybe the rest of you guys could look at and say, how is he so successful with this? And how do we duplicate it? And how do we get in on some of that? But instead, it just seems like everybody wants to go back to the same old tired distribution model that keeps shrinking year after year.
I think if some of these people could get out of their own way, again, I have to think that, guys like Gary Groth and Mike Richardson would actually sit down and be like, okay, what are they doing right that we're doing wrong? And I think that the media for the last couple of years especially has sort of like hidden it. Like, you have to be looking at this. If I were running a comics publisher, I'd be like, why are these guys making $500,000, $1 million on their books and we're struggling? What are they doing? What are they doing that's different than what we're doing? And again, you don't have to, agree with the politics. You don't have to agree with what people say. But clearly there's something going on. And instead of asking those questions, they immediately get their backs up and they're like, oh, there's a bunch of Nazis. I hate books. I'm like, you can get away with selling people shock once or twice, but not consistently again and again and again. And these people have repeat customers.
Well, the thing is, too, that the more that you do that, the more vitriol that you throw at people, all that does is make the people that hear it say, oh, these guys are the worst people on earth. I want to go see the shit show. And they go and they look.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, well, this isn't as bad as I was told. And then, maybe they go, oh, I kind of like some of the things this guy has to say. Oh, I like this book that he's doing. I like that art. I like this character. And then they start, basically, Mark Waid made Comicsgate. He's I think you and I have talked about this before. He's the father of Comicsgate.
Yeah. I mean, as strange as it is, we'll talk about Mark Waid. Yeah. I personally, and look, I didn't know Mark as well as you did, but I talked to him a couple times. I always had a lot of respect for him. But I actually consider him the father of Comicsgate, because if he would not have thrown kerosene on the fire, it wouldn't have gotten the mainstream attention that it did. It wouldn't have become a cause. And so basically what happened was, even people who weren't really necessarily on board with things that, Comicsgaters were saying, were on board with the sentiment that we can't let a handful of people within the comic book industry decide who gets to publish and who doesn't get to publish. And that's kind of the antithesis of what especially the indie comic scene has been about. And so he actually, brought more attention to it, and that's when things blew up. So, thanks, Mark Waid, for that, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, as soon as he set himself up as the sheriff of the industry and deciding who was going to get to publish what, that was pretty much the beginning of the end for, for what he was trying to do, which was, keep certain people out. Yeah, you can keep them out of the mainstream industry, but how much money is the mainstream industry making? How viable is it long term? And it just seems like, you're going to be able to crowdfund. You're going to be able to keep much more money. You're going to be able to pay your people better. They're going to make a better living. You're going to be able to offer so much more than the companies are offering. It's like, yeah, you might get to work on Wolverine, and say like, yeah, I wrote Wolverine for a while. And people will go, ooh, that's nice. But then when you're going, yeah, and I also have a GoFundMe up to pay my rent. Yeah. What are you really accomplishing? And, I have a crazy amount of respect for Mark as a writer. And, I've seen him do some really good things behind the scenes. I've seen him really put his money where his mouth is a couple of times. So, I've got a lot of respect for a lot of things that he's done, but that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he's done. And I don't necessarily agree with all of his opinions or all of his actions. And, he sent me a message a while ago, and I just responded to him. And I'm not saying anything here behind Mark's back or
right.
that I haven't said directly to him. He sent me a message, and I responded to him, and I said, Mark, you're driving people to Comicsgate. You're driving them up there, and right to the curb, and you're pushing them out. What do you? If you really don't like what's going on, you're going about it the wrong way. Oh, I said, and here we are, right? With Comicsgate making money hand over fist, and their books being successful, and their creators getting more and more, attention and more followers, and they're putting out things that the audience wants. And you would think that the rest of the industry would look and say, oh, okay, what is it that the industry want, or what is it that the fans want? What is it that our customers want? Instead of just dismissing them as alt-right Yahtzees because they don't want their books filled with your politics. They just want a solid story, solid character pieces, action, adventure, the things that comics used to have. And before anybody comics have always been political. Yeah, to an extent, but they've never been so firmly one viewpoint political, and never so ham-handed.
Yeah,
and never just, slamming it down your throat whether you like it or not. There was a subtlety. There was a lot of different viewpoints. And Nesenti used to write great books where she would present two sides of an issue, and as a kid I would read it and I would just be fascinated because I would be I'd be exposed to all these different ideas and was kind of given the ability to make up my own mind. Obviously Anne leaned one way, but she didn't beat you over the head with it. And I think it's unfortunate that we're so far past that now.
Well, I mean, even that live stream was very indicative of where the comic book industry is, where there isn't any, sitting down talking about things. It's we're going to tell you how things are, and you're going to sit down, shut up. And if there are any dissenters, we're going to mock you. We're going to call you names. We're going to drive you out of the city, out into the countryside. And I guess what blows my mind about the whole Comicsgate situation, again, we've never, come out and said we're Comicsgate or anything. We don't really have a dog in this, but I I think the thing that blows my mind is they basically told them, like, well, get out of here. We don't want you in the comic book industry. You go do your own thing. Well, fine. They did. And they still won't leave them alone. You know, it's like you got what you wanted. They're outside the system. And now you're jealous that they're making a lot of money. But you drove them away. I mean, think about the millions of dollars that went to Comicsgate books that could have been funneled into comic shops or funneled into small press. And they drove them away. And you know, Mark Waid, you know, he cost Antarctic Press a lot of money, you know, in my opinion. And that was actually, you talk about, you know, putting people in the car. Again, I had a lot of respect for Mark. I've talked to Mark. But that, as a small press guy, as an indie guy, what he did absolutely terrified me. Because I'm like, one person can decide whether or not you're allowed in comics in any capacity. Like, you can't, like, I can see them like blackballing you from a company, but they will follow you around from company to company. They'll follow you over to Kickstarter. They'll make sure that you cannot go to conventions. That's just pure insanity, you know?
Well, this has gone on behind the scenes for the longest time.
Yeah.
I think it just finally became evident because it was so public. But, you know, normally it's done in Facebook groups and, you know, behind closed doors and the whisper networks. And, you know, I know that I'm on, you know, I've been mentioned in several of them because, you know, there's people that send me that information. And the point that I hit was that I don't care. You don't have anything to offer me.
Yeah.
You know, you can offer me a low paying gig on a character that I like, but at the end of the day, as much as I like that character, I'm not going to sell myself out for, you know, almost no pay to create IP for you. I'm just not going to do that. Not when I can put that effort into things of my own. And that's kind of the wake up call that Comicsgate sent throughout the industry, was that you don't have to just take the crumbs that they give you. You can go out and you can build your own, you know, you can build your own ship and you can run it the way that you want. And, you know, as long as you take good care of the customers and you make sure that, you know, you're treating them well and you're giving them what they want, they're going to support you. And that is terrifying for an industry that wants homogenization of, you know, politics and thought.
Yeah. And it's just scary because, I mean, this, you know, we've seen it before because, you know, we worked in, you know, we did webcomics for a while. I remember the shade that the comic book industry used to throw at webcomics people. They used to throw it at graphic novelists. Then after that, they threw it at people who were doing crowdfunding. In fact, I thought it was very ironic. You know, Fantagraphics actually was throwing lots of shade at Kickstarter when it first started. And like a year later, they needed Kickstarter to save them. But I digress. You know, and the comic book industry has just been, and I did say that in the chat, the comic book industry has always been 5 or 10 years behind the curve. And now it's become fatal. You know, they prolonged the trip to the doctor for much too long. And they're getting the wake up call that, you know, they're sort of reaching, I think the direct market anyway is reaching end of life. And, you know, nobody seems to have a plan. There's no plan.
No, and now they're just going to take the medication and not, you know, make any lifestyle changes. You know, they're going to take the medication and just subsist on it as long as they can, as they get sicker and sicker and weaker, it seems, rather than, you know, say, hey, maybe I need to change my lifestyle. Maybe I need to change my diet. Maybe I need to, you know, maybe I need to run 3 times a week. You know, if you want to keep the metaphor going.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're not going to do that. They're just going to go right back to the way that things were, and it's going to be a vastly diminished industry. I've already cut orders. You know, we had to do our new FOCs for the books that will be distributed soon, and I went through and I slashed everything because I know there's just some customers that aren't coming back.
Yeah. I just think it's funny. I'm, you know, going back to what I've got Rich Johnson's article pulled up, and actually, you know, I was surprised. It was pretty fair. He didn't go into any of the drama that happened in the chat. He did point out his questions. He asked very hardball questions. He said, how do the publishers here feel when Diamond stated they were stopping payments last month and to Diamond's later 25% payment schedule, and they weren't happy. Gary Groth wasn't happy. But, you know, it's hard to tell somebody how pissed off you are when you're in a live stream with your peers. And the guy who's you know, basically set himself up as, and he did. Geppi, I think, referred to himself as kind of the bank of the comic book industry. And you've got him sitting there looking you right in the eye, and you've got your peers there. I mean, do you want to be the one that breaks out and tells him to, you know, suck a peach? I mean, I'd be like, where the hell is my money, Garrett? Or where the hell is my money, Steve? You know, I'm surprised Gary Groth didn't get into it more with Steve Geppi. But they're all like, oh yeah, we've got some camaraderie. We're gonna build, you know, kumbaya. It's gonna be great. We're gonna go back to the way things were, and it's gonna be wonderful. But no specifics. that we've got some plans, we got some, but no specifics. Meanwhile, you've got people out there on YouTube making hundreds of thousands of dollars, once or twice a year. They're selling comics. They're doing just fine.
Yeah, it's funny. They'll talk about camaraderie, and then they'll go back to their offices and once again begin plotting how to steal licenses and personnel from each other, as they have in the past. It's some companies obviously, much worse than others. And like I said, there's certain companies there who the people that were there I actually have respect for, and some that I don't. But yeah, it's really interesting, the face that they're trying to put on it. And I actually feel bad for Gary Groth, because obviously his is one of the smaller companies. He's somebody who needs those payments coming in to cover his overhead. And you're right, he can't sit there and say, "Give me my goddamn money." Yeah, because Geppi's got him by the balls, basically. Yeah. He doesn't have to, and if he doesn't do it, then Gary's got to go get a lawyer, and he's got to try and sue him for it. And I'm sure it's not enough money that once you go through all that it's worth it. So he just kind of has to sit there and take it, and it sucks, and I feel bad.
But then you have guys like Todd McFarlane, who, God, I want to get Todd McFarlane on the show, damn it. That's my goal. That's my life goal. I want Todd McFarlane on CLOWNFISH TV. If anybody knows Todd McFarlane, he has an open invite. I would love to sit down and talk to him for like an hour. You have Todd McFarlane, who said in a video on some other channel, he was like, "I'm not signing that suicide pact. I'm not doing it." He's like, "I'm going to sell my comics. I'm going to sell my stuff. I'm going to do how, I'm going to take care of myself, my company, my people, my family." And, you can't fault publishers trying to do an end run around the diamond system. I think Gary Groth, back in the day, he was, a firebrand. It's got to be hard for him to bite his tongue and just, have to take it.
Yeah, but the position that he's in, you understand why he does, because that guy's holding his money. Yeah. And yeah, it's, oh God, if you got Todd on the channel, I would kill to talk to him just for a few minutes. Todd's one of those guys that he was a rebel back in the 90s, and he's still a rebel today. He didn't become like, I think Eric Larson used to kind of be a huge rebel, and now he's very much the company man. And he's one of the guys who came out and called webcomics amateur hour.
Yep. I remember that. I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" I was like, "Okay, all right."
Yeah. So he's kind of it's the old saying, here's the new boss, beat the old boss. That's kind of what Larson's become. But Todd is still that same scrapper. It's like and it served him well. He's got a Kickstarter that's over $2 million. I
think it's $2 million. Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, okay, so if the crowdfunding's bad, you've got Todd McFarlane doing it. It's okay if Todd McFarlane does it though, because he's been vetted by the industry. But actually, not really. Actually, I remember Todd. The only reason people didn't mess with Todd is because he made so much money. Because he really would rip into Marvel. I remember that issue of Spawn. What was it like? I want to say it was 8 or 9, where he basically just gave the comic book industry the biggest middle finger. And I remember reading that as a kid and being like, "Oh my God, it must really suck to work in comics if Todd McFarlane's, got all the DC characters, Marvel characters in jail. He's got Cerebus and he's got the whole thing, and with Dave Sim. And, he's always been very, very outspoken, and we need more of that, and I think that's what happened. Comics lost its spark. I mean, you look at Will Eisner. Everybody's like, "Oh, the Eisner Awards, blah, blah, blah." Will Eisner was scrappy as fuck. I mean, he was a scrappy ass dude. And he was brilliant, but he was damn good at what he did when it came to making money too. And but it's almost like comics has lost its fire. It has, and it's lost, it's stopped being hungry, and it's become complacent, and now it's off to the slaughterhouse.
Well, comics used to be the outcasts, and it used to be the rebels, and even art itself used to be the people that were outside of the the status quo. They weren't part of the establishment. They were always pushing the envelope and bucking against it. And now comics has become the establishment. You have to have rigid conformity, or you can't work in the industry. You'd better keep your damn mouth shut, and you'd better toe the line if you want to have a job. And that's not the way that it used to be. It used to be full of scrappy people who had balls, and who would take, if they saw an injustice, they would take the fight to it. And now that's not the case, and the industry has suffered terribly for it. We're only getting one viewpoint. We're only getting one sort of. It's just it's really depressing to see. And then, you see somebody like Todd come back out and be like, yeah, I'm not doing this. I'm going to, they're like, everybody must do this. And Todd's like, I'm not gonna, I'm going to go over here and have a sandwich. What do you think of that? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
there's nothing you can do about it, because Todd is one of the last like great champions of the meritocracy. He busted his ass to get into the industry. When he got into the industry, he worked his ass off, and he continued to do it. And God love him. The guy's success because of just nothing but raw determination.
Yeah, no, I remember. How I got my Spawn #1 was I actually bought it at Walmart back in the day when Walmart had comics. Well, now they have comics again, I guess. But back in the day, with it came with a VHS tape of Todd. I think he was at, I want to say, San Diego Comic-Con or some comic convention, talking about how he broke into comics. And that was like me watching that video. I watched that video so many times when I was in high school. I'm like, this is how you break into comics. You listen to Todd McFarlane, because he's like, I got lots of rejection layers. And I'm like, cool. So like the following year, I'm weaseling my way into Marvel Comics and getting rejected, and, going actually visiting the offices and everything else. And, DC not long after that. And, until finally, I broke in like years later when I actually wasn't looking to break into comics. But, yeah, I mean, he lit a fire under my ass when I was a kid, and we need more people like that. Absolutely. Or the industry's got to die.
I remember my dad drove me like 200 miles out of our way on a trip to Washington so that I could go visit Todd McFarlane's comic shop.
Oh my God.
The Spider's Web. And he wasn't there.
Oh.
But I think it was like his brother-in-law was. And so, it's like, but I was still excited because it was Todd's shop. I was really, it was really big fan of Todd's back in the day. And plus, he worked with, actually, as we record this, it's David Michelini's birthday, who was the writer that worked with Todd on Amazing Spider-Man for much of his run. And so, those two guys, like, really, that's where my Spider-Man fandom like really hit its fever pitch, was when those two guys were on the book.
Yeah, it was good times. But yeah, the whole crew, the founding Image guys, they were kind of hell on legs. And you look at the Eastman Laird, and a lot of these creators are still very respected today. Alan Moore. I mean, it's but now it's like, God, if you say anything out of turn, you are blacklisted from the industry. It's become very, very soft. And I'm appalled at how quickly it happened. Because I look at the like the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, and even the situation with talking about Waid and Meyer. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the CB LDF would have actually gave money to Meyer, because they would have been like, well, the industry's trying to bully him out of comics. I mean, you look at some of the stuff they defended before, and they would have probably been on Meyer's side, and that's not the case now. Now it's just a mouthpiece for the industry.
Yeah, it's just all become very uniform, and it's like the Kree super intelligence, but without the intelligence. It's just all crammed together, one big hive mind.
God. So yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to talk about, though, is I wanted to talk about kind of the missed opportunity. Again, you can get all these people in one room, but you can't come up with a solution. Sad, very sad.
Well, I think you need a host who's willing to challenge people and ask tough questions, and this guy clearly was just about patting everybody on the back, and isn't it great that I got all these people together, and but at the end of the day, that's not what the industry needs. We don't, cheerleading is good, but it's not good when there's no plan, and the team is falling apart. You've got to actually still have a guy out there calling plays, and that's what this video needed. And I think that was like my huge initial disappointment with it, and then of course the rant was the cherry on top. Okay, there's nothing here that's worth anything.
That was my takeaway too. I was just like, I just hear Steve Geppi telling everybody things are going to be fine. I hear people who had, fire in their belly 10, 20 years ago, just kind of taking it. And, then all the drama in the chat, and then the host just imploding. And I was like, yeah, missed opportunity. Missed opportunity. If you could get these people together again and actually be like, okay, for real. Now that was, a rehearsal for real. What the hell are we going to do? Be honest. No, don't hold back. Just be freaking honest. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I had a small sliver of hope that this situation would drive some new ideas in the industry. But as I sat there, someone pointed out to me that was texting me, said, "Wow, just look at all these old men." And like I didn't really think about it, but then as I looked at it, I was like, you know what? Yeah, like where's there's nobody here who's scrappy and hungry. It's just all people who've been doing it for years, and they're kind of like worn down, and some of them don't even really care about comics. They just want to get that Hollywood deal, going, get those movies going. So, what did I expect? Did I expect a lot of fire? Like I think out of everybody that was sitting there, I was like, okay, who's gonna survive? And the only company that I really thought was in a good position to survive was Dark Horse.
Yeah, and they diversify too. They actually, they have a lot of product outside of comics. They do the video game art books and stuff like that, and they've got other distribution channels besides Diamond. So yeah, there'll be companies like that'll be fine. But yeah, if I were Boom, if I were IDW, I'd be really worried.
Yeah, obviously they can't come on and just start weeping, but come on and get a dialogue going. Like I said, I would have liked to have heard more from Mike Richardson because, like I said, I think Dark Horse is one of the companies that can weather this because they're diversified and it seems like they're very smart with the way that they handle their business, at least from the outside. I've never worked for them, but from the outside and from the talks I've had with Mike, it seems like they're very sharp and that they know what they're doing. So, why don't you guys give that guy the floor for a little bit to talk about some ideas, maybe. I don't know.
I was actually kind of depressed. I walked away from it. I was angry and I was depressed because I was like, you had all these people in one room to have this big powwow and you blew it. So I don't know. I don't think I'm at this point. I think it's going to be up to individual publishers, individual creators to carve out a livelihood. I don't think, Papa Diamond's going to do much for you. I mean, you can use Diamond, but I would strongly recommend you have a plan B and then a plan C, just in case, plan B doesn't work out. But I mean, if anything else, we've seen that this system does not work. It does not work. And you have to think about yourself. You have to think about your company. DC, I can't fault DC at all for doing an end run around Diamond and trying to get books out because they have to.
No, and they were vilified for it.
Yeah.
It was like, everybody's been bitching about Diamond for decades. And then the moment someone goes, okay, well, Diamond shut us down and we're looking into alternatives, then all of a sudden they're betraying the industry.
Yeah, I know. It's disgusting. And then we saw what happened with, Peter Simeti with Alterna. They were angry because they were, doing end runs around Diamond and the comic shops. Well, I'm like, well, because, the Whisper Networks, Alterna Comics, which has been around for 13 years now, is on the naughty list. So yeah, if you want to get Alterna Comics, you got to buy them directly from Alterna because of the bullshit.
And again, it was Mark Waid that went out and set the dogs on Alterna for daring to have a social media policy where all they said was, we don't want you using blockchains. You can block people individually if they're being obnoxious to you, but we don't want you just cutting out a huge swath of customers because they follow one guy that you don't like,
God, it was Mark. I didn't know it was Mark. It was Mark that was involved in that?
Yeah, it was. And it was shortly after the whole, I think it was before the lawsuit was filed.
Okay.
And I think it was where he had kind of like, well, I don't want to look like I'm doing, it was when his not doing his victory lap that wasn't doing a victory lap.
Oh, God.
After getting the Antarctic book. And I think he was feeling pretty, like he was the sheriff of Comics Town, and he didn't like Peter's policy because obviously you're siding with the harassers and the bigots.
Oh, for God's sake!
By daring to suggest that you not tell a huge swath of customers to F off, which is just common sense. I can't believe that we keep having this discussion when it is just common sense not to tell your customers to go to hell.
Welcome to comics current year. Yeah, and it worked out. Here's the irony. Again, thank you, Mark Waid, for that, because Alterna's actually blown up because you tell people not to go look. They go look, and they're like, hey, these books are actually pretty good, and they're pretty cheap, and yeah. Screw you, gatekeepers. We're going to go buy these books. So, again, hat tip to Mark Waid for giving Alterna a boost, if that is the case, and obviously, helping Richard Meyer make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars by drawing all kinds of attention to it.
People love an underdog.
Yeah. Yep. So, that's comics, the most self-defeating industry in entertainment right now, I think. So I think, you got any final thoughts? We're going to wrap this one up.
Yeah, no, I think the most self-defeating industry, definitely. Although I would say that Naughty Dog is trying to take video games down
God.
that path.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
Just want to get that little dig in. But yeah, it was fun talking to you. Glad we could get together and go over this train wreck of a video.
All right, so we'll do a live stream sometime. We'll try to get some other people in, and hopefully we don't get shut down. For wrong.
Maybe we can do a stream about like what we used to love about comics.
What we used to love.
Be like, yeah, because my favorite part of this was the brief moment that we talked about the Todd McFarlane era.
Yeah,
and God, I would love to talk about that and like Silvestri's X-Men and just some of the things that I fell in love with comics over instead of the current state of disarray.
I agree. We need to do that sometime. All right. Well, thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you guys later. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.